Welcome to Lectionary Call-In for Tuesday, November 16th, 2021, where two laypersons, a pastor and an academician, gather for about 50 minutes each week to discuss the Gospel Lectionary for the coming Sunday, and this Sunday is November 21st. Each Tuesday we call in from wherever we may be at 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time, and for our friend Charles Willard in Minnesota in Central Time, that's 5:30 a.m. Our little team is working to be faithful to Lectionary Year B, and that puts us today in the Gospel of John. We hope this discussion will provide areas of focus and reflection, and here's how it works. We develop perspectives independently after the leadoff person shares some formative questions, and then in this virtual discussion room, we share, encourage, and challenge each other. And here are the folks joining us in today's discussion.
Charles Willard, Minnesota, 30 degrees.
Sarah Mickelson, Tampa, Florida, not 30 degrees.
Bill Hall, St. Petersburg, 58 degrees it says on my thermometer.
Don Upton in Charlotte, North Carolina. I don't know why we're doing this, but it is 38 degrees. Hello, everybody. And the leadoff person for today is our friend Bill Hull, who's going to read the Gospel Lectionary text and then get us started with a few questions. Hello, Bill. How are you?
I'm well, and welcome to my colleagues on this. And as always, we are grateful for those who will view and listen later. You're part of the conversation. And I might mention, Don, you may have in mind to mention this at the end. This will be discussed again this coming Sunday at 10 o'clock on Zoom on Palmacia. If you are interested in tuning into that, you can go to the website, which Don will mention at the end, and you can tune in to yet another conversation over this. We are ending Year B in the lectionary calendar, and we have left Gospel of Mark and gone to the Gospel of John, chapter 18, verses 33 through 37 for this passage. I will read it, make a few comments, and then offer my questions to my colleagues. Again, John 18, 33 to 37, actually 38, I'm going to add a part of a verse that the lectionary leaves out, and this is from the New Revised Standard Version. Let us listen to this portion of God's Word. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked Jesus, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" The word of the Lord, thanks be to God. And just a couple of comments. This story, by my reading, is essentially told the same in all four of the Gospels, not just the Synoptics, but we just read from John. It's in John 18, Matthew 27, Mark 15, and Luke 23. So we have the essence of this dialogue in all four Gospel accounts. And there's a lot of energy among the four of us and among others over this whole issue of naming this coming Sunday Christ the King. Some call it the reign of Christ. Others call it the monarchy of Christ. Various titles, all of which deal with the problematic word kingdom. Now, the first question, and Charles, I'll go to you first here in a moment. In verse 33, Pilate asked Jesus, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus then questioned Pilate's motive in asking the question. What do you imagine was Pilate's purpose? Charles?
Thank you, Bill. This context has always been a problematic concern for me because I'm not sure that we can know. In fact, I'm fairly sure we can't know what was Jesus' purpose, for that matter. I'm not clear that we know what the purpose of what am I trying to think of? The people that set up the lectionary readings so that it came out this way. We will read Mark. Mark has his own report of this meeting, which, like the other two synoptic gospels, is quite short. Nothing of the kind of interaction that occurred in the Gospel of John. And I think we have to be careful in trying to then talk about imagining what they thought, how this was heard. These are things we just can't know, and my own concern is that we spend a lot of time talking about what is obviously, what appears, at least to me, to be the creation after the fact of the dialogue. I mean, the disciples, none of the disciples, you can't imagine under the circumstances, any of the disciples. In fact, it's hard to imagine that the formal ruler, the manager of Palestine at that point, or at least Jerusalem, would have had this kind of conversation, would have had this kind of back and forth where Pilate, goes from one place, then he goes back, then he goes back again, and it's the more there is to the text as it is in John. I mean, that's why John takes up, if you write it out and put it side by side, as I've done just to make it easier for me to work with, like this, where this is John's narrative. John, who was the furthest away from the writers of the Gospels, this is his account of what happened with Pilate and Jesus. These three are the accounts of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They simply. So I'm just concerned about how heavily we talk about what he could have meant. We don't know what he could have meant. We know how it might have been heard by somebody standing around. We know how we might think about it, but we don't know what was going on in Pilate's head. We don't know why he said what he said. We can imagine, but we don't know.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Don, your thoughts?
I'll go with we don't know, because I think that might be part of the point of this. We all know the language about there are many rooms in this mansion, right? Well, in the world of justice and order and peacekeeping on earth, there are many rooms, and this is in a really negative way. It is so chopped up. And we see many rooms in this story and in the other Gospels too. And here's Pilate potentially taking Jesus to a private place. Does that create justice? Does that create chaos? Is this a hidden discussion? Can you see into it? There are many audiences, just like there are many rooms, and there is no kingdom there when Jesus speaks of potentially being a king or being a part of a kingdom. If I've gotten older, the temptation to compare kingdoms, to understand the kingdom of heaven by looking at the kingdoms like this one, it just doesn't work. There's no shadow of a kingdom here. It's chopped up into such pieces. You can't get there from there. So what is Pilate's intention? I think it's to get to what he would think of as the truth in terms of rendering a verdict, veredicto, to speak the truth. And his truth, I believe he's vested in, that it solves a problem based on the many audiences. And it's not just, what room are you in, when are you rendering it, who's involved, and who's listening. He's got many, many audiences. And I think that's what's really counter to the idea of the kingdom or the rule of the creator. That you can't get there from here. It's chopped up so much. And by the way, Pilate's a king, but not really. Pilate has a king too. Pilate has a Caesar. So even that's chopped to pieces. So if he has audiences that are onlooker, I do think it's true that if he doesn't do it properly, the story's going to be told anyway by people around him. So he's got to get it right. I do know he's going to have to document what he did. He's going to do it in terms of outcomes, in terms of the verdict. It's all. So he is watching his audience very carefully. He's going to document for Rome what he's done in that month or in that quarter or in that year. And write these things down. There is no way to get to the kingdom of heaven from here. There's no way. There's no way. There's no way for a truth. There's no way for a verdict. There are too many rooms and too many audiences. And so I think his intent is, I just wrote down a few. This is a good question for a class. What is he trying to do? What is his intent? He's trying to find a pathway for his verdict, understand the subject matter, manage issues. He's got a checklist of things he probably does. He may have done this before. Starting point, where do I begin? Who are you? What is the identity of this person? How do I size this person up? And the system around him. And then can I get to a transaction? And it ends up being very transactional. There's no shadow of the kingdom there. This is not a transactional relationship, right? I mean, what Jesus is about to do in terms of the sacrifice. And this is an empire extending into this world, which changes the way people relate to it. So I think it's important to remember he's not even a king. He has a king. They may call him a king to give him certain power and certain ability to make judgments and solve problems, but even he is not a king. Anybody can be a king. Anybody can be a king on any room, on any day. They could be a king, which has nothing to do, no shadow of understanding. And I am frustrated that the Lectionary Committee took us out of Mark. We've been building up through the summer, the bread of life and Jesus, and they leaped to John. But of course, John begins with, in the beginning was the Word. It's a book of timeless and eternity. And here we are moving from room to room to audience. It's just chaos. Okay, Bill.
Thank you, Don. Sarah.
Might Jesus have uncovered Pilate's true motive? I'm listening to this exchange between who is divine and who is completely the antithesis of divinity. So if Pilate represents human power, justice, politics, a fragment, a shard of what a kingdom could be, and he's trying to assess or ascertain who the person of Jesus is he a threat to Pilate? Is he a threat to the rule and peace, the Pax Romana? I think that's part of what this dialogue is about. Jesus is simply asking the question, are you asking because you're interested yourself, or have you heard something, or have you been told something? Reveals the honest truth about Pilate, that Pilate's not interested in hearing very much from Jesus. He's just trying to figure out if Jesus is a threat. And so he's not interested in the truth of God's kingdom, just the determination and elimination of any threat that might be undermining Pilate's power. It's certain, I wonder, I would imagine that Pilate has heard reports of Jesus coming into Jerusalem and the crowd that threw down their cloaks and was shouting, Hosanna, save us. And that might be enough information for Pilate to go, this person has the ability to draw people to him, and I need to neutralize that. So I think Pilate's trying to figure out the best possible course of action for Pilate.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I mentioned earlier that this account is in all four Gospels, and I said they were, it seems to me, basically the same. There is one difference that I will note. There are probably others. In Luke's account, unless I'm overlooking something, Luke is the only one who records in chapter 23, verse 2, "Then the assembly rose as a body and brought Jesus before Pilate. They began to accuse Jesus, saying, 'We found this man perverting our nation, forbidding us to pay taxes to the emperor, and saying that he himself is the Messiah, a king.'" So this account ups the ante. It's not just that he says he's king of the Jews. He's forbidding us to pay taxes. Now, my own way of dealing with this very valid caution that ultimately we cannot know for sure what actually happened and whose memory is correct. I would note that however the four gospel writers compose, whatever sources they use, they're reporting people's perception and memory. There's been a lot of modern day research that shows that our memories are problematic, but we do carry perceptions. And a principle of psychology and counseling is that behavior is a function of perception. In other words, my perception doesn't have to be accurate. We'd hope it would be. But if I perceive you to be a threat, that will influence my behavior. So I hear this as an accurate reporting of what perception people carried away. And so for me, it has the ring of reality, sort of building on what I think you were saying, Sarah. Assumedly, the Jewish leaders and people bringing Jesus before him detested Pilate. He was the enemy. He was the oppressor, but they're trying to use him. They're trying to play him in their own way to deal with their problem. So Pilate's not only a manipulator, he is manipulated. And I think that's true of people who are hungry for power. Yes, they take advantage of others, but people learn how to play these people, at least hopefully in their minds, to their advantage. And so for Pilate, if in fact he heard the claim that Jesus was king of the Jews, he would see him as founding a rival nation. It doesn't say Jesus claimed to be king of Rome. The accusation is he claims to be king of a group of people in that area currently then under the Roman rule. And likely Pilate lived constantly at some level of fear. There was a history of assassinations of Roman managers, governors, whatever, and of their being removed by the emperor. And so I assume that any dictator like Pilate always lives with some level of anxiety that their day may come, and that he feared he might be undone. And all four Gospels record that it was not enough to murder Jesus. Pilate and his soldiers abused and mocked Jesus, and they had King of the Jews inscribed above Jesus' cross. That's in all four Gospels also. And there's this, in one of them, let me see which it is, in John, in the 19th chapter, the chief priests object to this title, King of the Jews, and they want it removed, and Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." So it's like, in a sense, Pilate's not only mocking Jesus, he's mocking the Jewish leaders. So it paints a very ugly picture of how those who lust after power will go to any means to maintain their power. Okay, again, we don't know for sure. Question number 2, and Don, I'm going to come to you first in a moment. Jesus declared in verse 36, "My kingdom is not from this world. My kingdom is not from here." What do you understand Jesus meant by those statements, Don?
I think it has to do with many rooms. It's kind of like Jesus when he was asking Pilate about what he wants. Why is he asking? Who's asking? Who's asking? And I think we work in so many rooms, whether we have power or not. If the who is on this day and this time, with your motivations, with what you care about, with the pressures that you have, with the authority you've been given, with the rules of the road, with the justice system that you're given, who's asking? And, when you go to events or meetings, sometimes you go through exercises that says it gets to who you are. And it's not, where you're born, what's your name, where you're from. It's, where are you today? Who are you? And I think there's so many layers to this for all of us, Pilate too, that the who's asking is chaotic and arbitrary on a particular day, in this case for the audience. So I think when Jesus deals with not from here, this world, we have a demonstration here of how shattered the world is. The real, we use that language a lot, shattered, but I think this is maybe one of the great examples, is Jesus is literally led from room to room, from place to place during these hours of his trial. And what results is, and, you use the word murder, what happens? We can talk about what happens to Jesus in many ways, can't we? Was he tried and convicted? Was he executed? Was he murdered? Was it a sham? We can give all those answers. So I think the point is we have many answers. If I look at the book and the statutes and what Pilate's job is, he was convicted and within the course of justice and the power system, he was rightfully executed. Take that. So I think it's not from here is this chasm. There is not a shadow of the understanding of the kingdom here. It is not possible. It is beyond all understanding. And all I can throw into it is if we want to enter in the idea of love and home and hearth and the family and the kind of following that he has on earth, which might be a reflection of that kingdom, there's no place for that in any of these rooms at all. And I'll add, there's no unity of these rooms. It's not like you're going from one room to another or the private conversation that may be taking place with Pilate and say, all right, let's see the continuity as we go back out to the public. There's no connection at all. It is chaos. There is no justice, but there is a verdict. And so I'm coming out of this, in past years, I would have gotten down into the legal issues and things, and I'm trained as an attorney, but I'm seeing nothing but the chasm and the whiplash of life. And even Pilate is not the king, and he's got to look upward towards Caesar and upward towards Rome to make a decision. In the beginning was the Word. I guess that's why we jump to John from Mark, so that we can remember in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And what follows is beyond all understanding on this earth. Bill?
Thank you, Don. Sarah, your thoughts?
I read David Lose's November 16th, 2015, In the Meantime blog or post about this, and it was very helpful to me in thinking about this particular question. In that post, we are given a glimpse of how the kingdom of this world, David suggests that this world is ordered and governed by different parameters than that which, or different parameters than that which governs the kingdom of heaven. And we have in Pilate an example of how earthly powers work, and that the deployment of violence to keep that power and the relational consequences of that deployment of power, how the systems are formed to leverage lives and promote poverty and death upon those who live at the margins. So this propagation of taking what I want by force or by domination puts at odds most of creation against that which God would have the purpose to be. So I found that very helpful, and I believe we see systems in our lives today that have been good examples of people working counter to what we understand the purposes of God to be. It might be corporate wealth, sometimes outright greed, that reaches over the value of human lives to feed its unending appetite. And I think that's a really good example of the way God's kingdom should work, could work, but isn't working here. And another example of how we took the idea that we could have the mind of God and we corrupted that and created our own system of kingdom here. And it's so far away from what God's purposes would have us be and do that we persist in our if you will, our piloting to put far away those things that would limit that power from. We try to separate ourselves and make it a board decision, that the board of the corporation would make these decisions and not that we would have any interest in the people who are served by the people, the product of that company. Whether it's a pharmaceutical company or whether it's an oil company or whether it's a company that banks, a finance company or an investment company, I think we're all called on the carpet a little bit to look not to our own devices but to God's as we govern.
Thank you, Sarah. Charles?
I'm going to pass at this point, thanks.
Okay. We're looking at, in this question, two statements by Jesus in response to Pilate. My kingdom, Jesus says, is not of this world, is I think the literal Greek. And the other is, my kingdom is not from here, or it can be translated this place. The Greek uses two different words, of this world or not from this place. I will note, I affirm the discomfort over the term Christ the King and kingdom. And that's a contemporary concern about this language of dominance. But I would note that Jesus doesn't reject the word kingdom. He says, my kingdom, my kingdom. I think Jesus, at least the impact on me is, kingdom means somebody leads. Somebody has concern for the greater good and leads. And so, along with our concern about kingdom meaning dominance, we need to remember that every group needs leaders. Now, we live in a democracy. We hope our democracy survives and thrives. But we need to be careful that we don't reject the idea that we need leaders, and we hope for shared leadership. In any event, Jesus does not reject the word kingdom, but he says, at least it means to me, it's not the way the world wants it to be. It is of this world, and this is where we live out the gospel. But I think my guess is or at least for me, the meaning is the shape, the purpose, the energy of the kingdom is not what the world expects. In Psalm 93:1, it begins, "The Lord is king. The Lord is robed in majesty." And there are other verses where that language is used, that God is king. And this teaching over power didn't begin in the New Testament. The Old Testament is an account of how Jewish leaders, time after time, lived up to the prophecy that Samuel tried to give to the people before they made Saul king. That 1 Samuel 8, I believe it is. The list, you want a king? They're going to take your possessions. They're going to take your young people. They're going to go to war. He predicted accurately. And recently I taught a course on leadership, and when we looked at the kings, the Bible's own assessment is that the majority of them missed the mark. They failed. They abused their power, including David, who was supposedly the greatest of the kings. And now in the other lectionary passages for this week, in 2 Samuel 23, it says, "Now these are the last words of David." And a little later it says, David says, "The God of Israel has spoken. The rock of Israel has said to me, one who rules over people justly, ruling in the fear of God, is like the light of morning, like the sun rising on a cloudless morning, gleaming from the rain on the grassy land." That is powerful imagery of what kind of leadership God wants. I take it to be nurturing. The green pastures of Psalm 23. One who rules with justice and reverence for God, light in the morning, sun rising on a cloudless morning, gleaming from the rain on the grassy land. So I think Jesus is seeking to say, yeah, there are kingdoms, and if I may, in a sense, Jesus is saying, yes, I'm king, but the kind of king I am will nurture people and minister particularly to those on the margins. Our third question. Jesus said to Pilate, "I came into this world to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." What do you understand to be Jesus' truth? And I'm going to build on what I just said. Everybody has their truth, I believe. All of us have a view of ourselves and our place in the world. And again, we act on that. That perception shapes our behaviors, how we relate to people. For example, we know this issue of people who were abused as a child likely will abuse others unless they get healing. Richard Rohr says that pain that is not transformed is transmitted, so that our perception, our experience of the world can shape us. And I think what Jesus is saying here is that truth is a dividing sword. If your truth and mine collide, we will likely get into some struggle for power. Which of our truths is going to prevail? And obviously, Pilate's truth is not the truth that Jesus is offering. Pilate was about power and domination and status, and Jesus wasn't. I'll remind us that Jesus said in verse 36, "If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews." Okay? Jesus renounces violence, and those who want to domineer will resort and incite others to violence to protect their positions of power. So Jesus is different in that way. And we know, we've looked at the passages where Jesus calls us to be servant leaders. Jesus got down and washed his disciples' feet. Jesus said he came to serve, not to be served. And I think ultimately the truth that Jesus is a relational truth, not a power dominance truth. It's a relation. And I hope that for ourselves individually and for those who listen to this and other sources, that what we nurture is a relationship with Jesus Christ, the Prince of Peace. And there's a rule in Christ's kingdom. It's not a rule of power or of hate or hurt, but it is a rule of love, ultimately of love. And I would close my comments by saying this. None of us fully and clearly understand the truth that Jesus is. Nicodemus in John 3. The Samaritan woman at the well in John chapter 4. Jesus did not sit on a throne like that of Rome, but rather was a carpenter from Nazareth, an itinerant prophet and rabbi who sought to empower unlikely persons to follow him and do his work on earth, guided by a spirit of truth, love, courage, and wisdom. I think that is something of the truth that Jesus is. Charles?
Pass.
Okay. Sarah?
I think that Jesus' truth is that God is love, and that earthly power is an illusion meant to lead us away from the purposes of God.
Mm. Preach it, sister. Well said. Don?
I'm trying to come up with an earthly analogy. I work with a lot of fiduciaries, but across many industries and many sectors. And I learned 20 years ago that I have to ask them kind of a where they're coming from question before they engage. And I'm looking at the language in the translation, not from this place. And, you form a board of directors, and if you don't figure out that one's coming from the board of a hospital, one's coming from a nonprofit, and two are coming from Fortune 500s that make products, and another is from a public-private partnership, go on and on and on. Just because you call them board members of fiduciaries doesn't mean they're all from the same place, and it creates a great deal of chaos because each one is going, this is the way it's done. Why? Well, this is the way it's done. And so I've been kind of dark about this discussion today, and I think there is that try to put a bright light on some of these things, which is not from here, not from this place, is something that we can all keep in our heart and what we do every day. Where are we say that, where you come from? And there's governance and power and audiences and concerns and many, many rooms we walk into every day carrying, you can call it baggage, or I think it's confidence. I don't know about you, I can wrap myself with all kinds of governance and rules that get in the way. And so the not from here is especially good in the book of John. In terms of the truth, if he's testifying to this, you look up in any dictionary, it's going to say you're going to provide testimony, you testify. It's a solemn declaration under oath for the purposes of establishing a fact. And I know there is a saving fact of the kingdom of heaven here, but I think for me today, the fact is not from this place. That is the testimony he's given, which just doesn't do anything, doesn't work. What I have here, the truth I speak, is not from this place. That is the truth. That is the message today, not from this place. And that's all you can do, because there's so many rooms and it's so chaotic, and where Pilate and the rest are coming from just doesn't create the truth. So if it's testimony, and we can debate whether or not we have a true transcript, but we know The transcripts don't reflect all the truth. We create transcripts for appeal and to understand, to be sure justice is served and the evidence is good. But is it the truth? Is it really the fact? I can read a transcript of a trial. Is that really going to reflect on the character of the people involved and the person that's accused? Probably not. Hopefully we do a good job. Does it do it? So we have this transcript from this personal meeting with Pilate. Does it do the job? Jesus just said not from this place. No, it does not do the job. Jesus makes that very clear. It does not do the job. Only one person can save here. But I think sometimes I forget that this has a footnote. This little transcript says, I offer into evidence the author of John, author of Mark, Matthew, it's all there. The author of John says, I offer into evidence the life of Jesus. Go back to chapter 1 and read it. I offer into evidence the testimony, the whole book. And I think that's what this is meant to do. It says, here, you want the transcript, the mission of Christ is, I offer up the meals. I offer up the healing. I offer restoration and reunions every step of the way, and every town and every person he met and every crowd and every message. I offer that, not from here. That's all I got, Bill.
Thank you, team members. I'll hand it back to you, Don.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed this, and we look forward to looking in and listening on Christ the King studies going forward. It's an interesting time of the year as we wrap up the calendar and get started on a new year. Year C, heads up everybody, Year C is right around the corner. Here we go again. Oh boy, wash, rinse, repeat every 3 years. I don't know about you, but boy, do I learn every time we come around this. And I look forward to working with all of you in the coming year. Palmacia Presbyterian Church is at 3501 West San Jose Street. That's in Tampa, Florida. And for more information, you can go to palmacia.org. That's PALMACEIA.org. And at that site, you can find other studies, Sunday school, discussions of lectionary, discussions of Christ the King, great sermons, prayers. You can take communion, outstanding music, and you're always welcome. And we'll see you next time.